Welcome, everyone. We'll give everyone just a moment to get logged on, and then we'll get started. All right. Well, thank you for joining today's Masterclass session. This is our second session with Justin Fitzpatrick and Jason Juhl, and we'll get to the topic and the introductions here again in a moment. But just a few housekeeping items. This is a CFP-CE webinar, and for the webinar, you have to have 50 minutes of live attendance. So please, if you are on here, keep in mind that you will have to stay on at least till 50 past the hour, because we have that requirement from the CFP board. Also, we have an RICP certificate for those who are looking for that certification or proof of attendance for your RICP designation. When it comes to questions, we do have the ability for you all to submit questions. If you see a question on there that you would like to have answered, please like it. We will try to address the ones with the most votes at the end. And with that, I will pass it over to Justin, and we'll get started.
All right. Thank you, Taylor, and welcome, everybody. Jason and I are really excited to get this going. Quick correction on the timing. Make sure you are on for 50 minutes. Do not log out at 9:50 if you logged in at 9:05 or whatever your time is. So you need 50 minutes to get the CE. All right, so we've got a lot to cover today, so we're just going to jump right in. If you missed our first masterclass session, please reach out to us. Go ahead and check out. Ashley is going to send out some links and materials where you can review that material. Again, it was a great discussion. We got a lot of really good feedback. And to start out, we're actually going to do just a really quick review so that if people did miss, or maybe you've need a quick reminder of where we started building the foundation for this masterclass on retirement income planning. We talked a lot, and Jason shared some really great stories about what it is retirees really want, what their goals are in retirement. And we talked a lot about this concept of living a fulfilling life, living the best life you can, not being a burden on your kids, not running out of money, and really about how experiences are the driver of this, and funding a lifestyle that retirees are eligible for is the goal. We want to avoid the regret zone where somebody reaches the end of their, maybe they reach the end of their health span, but not their lifespan, and they realize, oh, I actually could have done more. I could have lived a different life, and now it's too late. We talked also about how the goal of some explicit, amount of money I want in my account when I die. I want my executor to handle this much money. That is not a top goal for people. Often people say, well, I get it. There'll be some left. That's great. We also talked about how, unfortunately, that low priority goal is actually the goal when you're using probability of success. Whether you like it or not, the concept of probability of success is going to distort clients' perception of the world and even advisors' perception of the world, and drive you toward this low priority goal and away from what the real goals are. We talked about how if you're looking at the world and trying to figure out how much someone can spend, there are many possible spending levels, depending on if things are good or bad, and inflation is high or low, returns are high or low, and so on. And that the most likely amount that they can spend is actually right here, which in that probability of success framework, which is not a good one, that's 50% success, which no one has the ice in their veins to follow a plan that says you have a 50% chance of success. Instead, they tend to want 100% success, but unfortunately, by definition, mathematically, the spending level that has 100% success is the spending level that is 100% likely to be underspending. And so this whole framework is leading people to underspending and to not achieving their goals as stated. The reason for this was that the word success already means something. It means hitting your goals. It means fulfilling life, and so on. Live a great life. Unfortunately, probability of success doesn't guide you toward that goal. it guides you toward, you know, deprivation, basically. And so we talked about how instead we need to think about retirement income planning the way we think about investment planning, which is a balance between risk and reward. Or you could also think of it as a balance between the risks in retirement of underspending and overspending. We tend to focus only on the risk of overspending, but there's a risk of underspending as well. And just like in investment planning, very few people, probably no one, should be 100% cash or 100%, I don't know, crypto. Similarly, in the spending world, very few people should be, at the extremes here. So while the most likely amount someone can spend is mathematically right in the middle here, you'll end up proposing spending that is somewhere along this spectrum, probably in the underspending zone, but hopefully you don't have a system that's driving you toward underspending and regret. So that's the review of last week's content. Today we're going to be diving into the nuts and bolts of the actual retirement planning process. But before we get there, I wanted to at least hit one of the questions that we got from a few people, which was, okay, I get it. Maybe probability of success is not a good tool, it's not a good framing, but I still want to just use what I'm used to. Is there a way I can use my probability of success tools to do this kind of planning? So Jason, what are your thoughts on that?
Short answer, because I'm not great at being short-winded here. Well, so in all sincerity, I think of really a couple, maybe three components, one of which would be the client psychology, the advisor psychology, and then the scalability. All three of those would really be challenges with continuing to use probability of success in this decumulation phase. As we think about from a client's perspective, here we are scoring them with this probability of success. And within that probability of success, whether the client's financial plan is at an 80%, 90%, 100%, as we say the term probability of success, success is automatically ingrained in the client's mind. And I don't know about you, but I've never felt that 75% or 80% was successful. I certainly wouldn't give 75% effort or 80% effort as I'm looking to achieve my goals. And so I think psychologically, clients just strive for 100. And that becomes a really big challenge with probability of success. And so scoring anything under a 100 oftentimes for clients does mean that they could have room for improvement mentally to them. But as we have discussed, scoring a 100% probability of success really just means you're underspending your resources. And that's what we really want to help our clients avoid. We want to help them be able to live the life that they're eligible for, live the life that they've dreamt and the life that they deserve. Another component is the advisor psychology as well. You just said, if a probability of success were at 50%, how many of us has ice in our veins to continue to pursue that particular approach? And I think as advisors, we really continue to think about the 4% withdrawal rate, or maybe a target probability of success range between 80 and 95%. And so as scores start to fall, even me, when I was working under probability of success, I would get anxious when clients would be in that 70 or 75 range. And so there's my psychology as well as an advisor. And then last but not least is the scalability, right? You've got a proactive approach versus a reactive approach. And when you think about probability of success, oftentimes I was being reactive because clients were reaching out about their score and their declining score because of a volatile market. And therefore, that kind of put me in a little bit of a negative light. Sure, I picked up the phone. Sure, I addressed their question. And I was able maybe to help calm their nerves through our therapy session. But wouldn't it be better if I was able to reach out to them proactively? And through this guardrail system and spending capacity, it actually creates capacity for me within my practice and my ability to be proactive and to reach out with solutions in advance. And so ultimately that opens up the opportunity for for introductions. Because if we think about our client experience that we're trying to deliver, that we're trying to preach to our clients, we preach being proactive. As advisors, I talk about my job is to come up with solutions, is to pinpoint needs before you even recognize them as needs. And by doing so, that helps us develop a degree of trust between myself and my clients. And then it also develops a degree of happiness. And therefore, as my clients are happy, they're going to share their experience with others. And oftentimes that can lead to introductions. And introductions is one of the most valuable ways that we grow our business. And so in a nutshell, I just think it really boils down to decumulation is a unique phase. It's a unique chapter. Doesn't this chapter deserve a unique tool? And that's guardrails, that's retirement GPS, that's income lab.
Perfect. So the answer is no, you can't do it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's right. You can, there's a lot of things that are getting in the way there. So given that we're not going to focus on probability of success, we're going to focus instead on the question of, what can I spend? This is actually, before we actually get to this, let's talk a little bit about that switch. So switching from probability of success to what can I spend to, what are you eligible for? That actually involves a shift in how you do planning and specifically on what your first step is. Because if you're doing probability of success planning, you have to define how much you want to spend. It would make no sense to ask what your probability of success is without saying probability of success at what, at doing what. And so probability of success planning involves budgeting. It just always does. And that shift, I know from talking with advisors, can be a little bit jarring at first because you're used to doing that. Jason, I know you went through that shift from when you de-emphasize budgeting and you go to how much can I spend. What's that like? Is that a good experience as an advisor? Is it a good experience for clients? What are the pluses or minuses of that shift?
Yeah, we've done away with the word budget. Most of our clients see the word budget as restrictive and almost a four-letter word. So we talk about lifestyle. What kind of lifestyle do you desire? Or more importantly, as we enter this thinking of guardrails, what kind of lifestyle are you eligible for? And I know we're going to get into how that calculation comes to be, but it's really all about helping clients live out their greatest dreams. And the challenge is when you talk about budget, oftentimes they think of a couple things. Number one, they may not understand the type of income that their resources support. And therefore, they start to maybe not pursue some of their biggest goals, some of their largest goals, those bucket list items. Additionally, they have these past experiences of saving and investing. And as you talked about in our previous session, they've worked that saving and investing muscle for an extended period of time, and their spending muscle, their living, their wealth muscle is maybe atrophied a bit. And so that does create some challenges. And also, let's also address kind of the other thought process, and that is, if we're talking about what a person's budget is, and that client or prospect gives us their budget, what if they don't have the resources to support that budget? So doesn't it make more sense to kind of back into the number? And quite frankly, when we're talking about retirement planning with clients I work with, when I just ask them, would you rather talk about your goals, your dreams, and your aspirations and paint the picture of your retirement as a first step, or would you rather back into what you're eligible for and the spending that's possible? 9 times out of 10, they always want to know what they're eligible for.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of when, people have talked a lot about goals-based planning in the last, 10 or 15 years. It always struck me as a little strange to begin just with a blank slate and talk about goals if you don't have context for it. And I think that's what you're saying is starting with what you're eligible for. Okay, now you can build in goals into what you're eligible for. The other thing I've heard advisors say is that although clients may agree to go through kind of a budgeting process, what are you spending now and so on, when they're getting into retirement, in their working years, they probably didn't have to do that. They probably didn't have to share with their advisor how much they spend at Starbucks. Now, maybe if they were struggling and they needed some counseling and so on, maybe they did do that, but it's not common. And so to suddenly shift to retirement and now have to be, can feel like an invasion of privacy. Whereas telling someone, hey, here's what you're eligible for, go build a life with it. I don't care if you spend it all at Starbucks or none of it. It's just, this is what you're eligible for. That's a little more like the life they led in their working years. We just kind of trust them to spend less than they make. So if we are starting with how much can I spend, you'll see that in this, which is the high level process to building a retirement income plan that focuses on providing, for the actual goals people have, which is to live the best life they can. And it all starts with this first step, the resources plan. And this is, instead of starting with what do you want to spend, it's starting with what do you have? What are your resources? And so I wanted to just quickly share a couple ways that you can kick this off in the Income Lab software. So if you are just in the main list of households, there are 3 ways to kick this off. The best one is to import a household from another piece of software. And we are building more and more of these. I only have a Precise FP integration in this example. We do have Orion and a few other things. In fact, I'm going to share the list of those quickly here with everybody. So Orion, Precise FP, and Altruist right now. Coming soon are options for Redtail and Black Diamond. And what this looks like is, I'll search for, okay, I've got the Smith-Jones household. I'm going to import that. It's going to try to do it. And it often is going to do everything. But that one did succeed. Now I have the Smith-Jones household. I go in here, it's building your plan. And what that has done is it's looked at, in this case, Precise FP, and found this household, and it's trying to create a plan with everything it found there. Now, it's not going to be perfect, right? There could be some mappings that weren't exactly what you thought they should be and so on. But if I look in LifeHub, this plan already contains 7 investment accounts, contains some banking accounts, it contains some assets, a mortgage, all of that. And that's all I did was what you saw. That was live, that was fresh. So now I already have this thing built. You'll notice though there might be some missing things, like, oh, I didn't get Social Security, so maybe I want to add that, and so on. So this is your best bet getting the process going. And what we're looking for is to get income streams and investments into the plan. It could be Social Security, pensions, annuities, investments of any stripe, and get to that point. Now, if you can't do import household, there are 2 options. I'd say they're equal depends on your use case. If you want to get a plan going super quickly and refine it later, there's Quick Create. And so Quick Create is always going to guide you toward the bare minimum that you need, which is your portfolio assets. But then I can add a few other things. I could add a pension, I could add Social Security, and so on. So for example, maybe John has an IRA, $2 million. He has a pension for $1,000 a month. It's ordinary income. I think his PIA is $2,500, and he's still got a mortgage, and it's $150,000. Paying $2,000 on it, and it ends in 2030. Boom. So now there are still additional things I might want to do to refine these things, the timing, the inflation treatment, all that stuff. But you can see, like, if you were live with a client, it's kind of like filling out a form. Easy. It's you're tabbing between things, and again, now I already have a plan, and now I can refine it. So, maybe this IRA is not invested this way, it's more aggressive. Okay, let's make that change, that sort of thing. The last way to do this is with a full standard approach, which just gives you access to all of the details up front. So the use case for Quick Create is, well, you want to do it quickly, might be good. I know, Jason, you mentioned that for a prospect, you can create a plan in, 10, 15 minutes sometimes. And, you're not necessarily looking to have it all refined and perfect and full and so on. You just want to get it quick. That might be a use case. Then the other option is the standard creation. Here, you're going to put in the details of the household, their birthdays and so on. And then you'll get just the basics of the plan. So you'll get plan info, assets, and income. This one also has liabilities, but I can take that out. This is what you'll see because, again, we're just focusing initially on what those plan resources are, and then we'll get to refining the plan more fully. So again, first step to building a retirement income plan is getting those resources in there. We want all the investments, all the income streams that can fund retirement. 3 ways to do it. Import the household. That's the best way if you can. Otherwise, Quick Create or the standard approach. So with that, Jason, let's talk a little bit about best practices. Often the biggest question for someone who is trying to figure out what they can spend is it does revolve around the investments. It's kind of, how much can I spend from this and so on. What do you find some best practices are for building the investment portfolio in a plan? I know this is a place where people can really go down the rabbit hole. What are the things that are worth paying attention to, and which things would you say are not?
Yeah, so I guess just to level set, I go back to the client, and I always try to put myself in the client or the prospect seat. And what would I be thinking about if I was going to retire? I'd be concerned about how I've worked for my employer for a period of time, at least worked in my industry for numerous decades, and I've received a paycheck because of my wages and because of my skills, and now my paycheck's going away. So how do I generate income? And what accounts do I withdraw from at what time? What's going to be the tax impact or benefit? And so I like to acknowledge the fact that this is a challenging time. This is unique. It's uncharted waters here in retirement. And as your paycheck goes away from your employer, we want to ensure you still get a paycheck. And that paycheck ultimately is derived from your resources. And so as we think about your resources can be Social Security, pension, rental income, as well as your investment accounts that you've saved up. And each of those investment accounts kind of has a different tax status, if you will, and registration type. And so my job is to generate the income you need to fund the lifestyle you desire, and ultimately determine when the appropriate time to start Social Security is, when the appropriate time to start that pension is, or whether to do a lump sum or survivorship benefit, and then ultimately fill in the gap. So you can go on and live the life that you deserve, dreamt, and certainly desire. And so this software helps us with the framework in order to provide and define the parameters of how your resources will help us generate income, and how much income do your resources support.
Makes sense. So tax status, account type, that stuff is super important because now we're not going to dive deep on this today, but sessions 4 and 5 are going to be about tax smart distribution planning. So this is setting the baseline, the foundation again for getting that right. So making sure if it's a traditional IRA, if it's a 401k, if, when is it, in-service withdrawals, are they still working? Did they leave after 55? All those things are really going to help that tax smart distribution planning be better and more accurate. What's your approach toward the asset allocation of these accounts? I know we sometimes get people asking, what should I care about the little, things one way or other? Should I be exactly what my, ticker symbols are? What are your thoughts there?
I was one of those. Justin, you probably remember me getting in your ear and asking about the allocation, those types of things. As advisors, I think we just want to try to do A/B testing. At least that's what I wanted to do, was understand, okay, here's the tools, the software I was using before. Here's the allocation I was using before in, probability success software. Here's how Income Lab compares. But the reality is decumulation is all about a couple core components. It's all about balances. It's all about tax status, and it's all about your target allocation. Those are really the 3 elements that drive our positioning and driving and generating income in retirement. So as long as our allocation is appropriate from a risk perspective, that really kind of solves that problem. If you really want to get granular, which you can do, and I've done, is you can build out custom allocation models just to feel more comfortable and confident. So I've done that before, and that is helpful. But the reality is decumulation is more about the resources, which are the balances in your accounts, the tax status or registration type, and then just the general risk allocation.
I definitely like the best practice of using the model allocations. So the software has some defaults that you can use just on that slider. But typically, people are if you use the same sorts of allocations, it could be 5, 10, 15, however many you tend to use in your practice. That's the best approach. And I think what I heard you say is, getting the target allocations as opposed to whatever the allocation happens to be today. So if, you haven't rebalanced in a little while back to the target, well, we want to model you being at the target, not at the slightly off the target that you happen to be today, because it's about 10, 20, 30 years of projections rather than, the down to the decimal point allocation. Also, you said A/B testing. I suspect if you A/B tested plans that differ only, by 1 percentage point in asset allocation, you're not going to see, there's nothing to write home about. Those aren't, differences that matter.
And I do just want to also note that I've found myself in situations where I kind of have paralysis by analysis. And it was just fear of change, because it was hard. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. It can be mentally challenging to embark on a new process. There's new change. And ultimately, I was most concerned that the client was going to ask me a question that I wouldn't have the answer to. And the reality is, when we're focused on financial planning, resources, spending capacity, and goals, allocation is the last thing in a client's mind, and it doesn't come up.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good point too. Sometimes our fears they're fears in our head. They're not the thing that the client's going to bring up. So the second set of things you just mentioned about resources, getting these going, it's investments. Let's get the tax status right. Let's get the restrictions right. Let's get the ownership right. Let's get the target allocation right. It does matter if you're planning to be 60% stock versus 10%. And the other big thing is non-portfolio income. Thankfully, most people have some, at the least it's Social Security. And so what are the, again, best practices? What should I pay attention to here? How should I model them? What's different about Income Lab in terms of planning for these other cash flows? What do you recommend paying attention to?
Yeah, so understanding if there is a legacy goal or kind of a final portfolio goal, that's always kind of a first check mark. But then also to understand, those variable expenses, how that's going to come into play, right? If you're looking to pay off a mortgage in retirement, or maybe there's a wedding or a major vacation, some of those milestones, some of those elements that might be duration specific or time sensitive goals. That's going to be an important element to build in.
So I think you're talking about how do we go from resources plan to core plan, of adding in those expenses. I'm going to hit this really quick before we go there. This one is one that especially brand new users to Income Lab will often, you'll think of things in annual terms that are really monthly. So say, oh yeah, I got this pension. It's, $20,000 a year. If it is actually arriving monthly, put it in as monthly. That's, it's a small thing, but it'll make your experience much better. It'll make the graphs look nice. It'll be important. And then the tax and inflation treatment are crucial. So, kind of like with accounts, let's get the owners right. Let's get the, survivorship behavior right. I'm going to go over an example of that. And let's get the tax treatment right. Because again, for tax smart distribution planning, you're going to be basing that on a foundation. Hopefully it's a solid foundation, and which things are wages and have FICA, which things aren't, which things are, investment income, and so might be subject to net investment income tax, the Obamacare extra Medicare thing. All of that you're going to want to get correct. The timing of things, getting those correct. Those are the keys. Let me see here. Okay, I want to take just a second to hit why inflation and survivorship are really crucial. And this is also a difference in Income Lab that can kind of confuse people occasionally. So I have an example here. This household has $1 million. They have a $2,000 a month adjusted for inflation pension, and they're taking about $3,500 a month from their portfolio. Super, super simple. Crucially, this pension, we have it set to be adjusted for inflation and to last for both of their lives. So if I go to, for example, go to LifeHub and look at that pension, I've got it adjusted for inflation, and it doesn't change if either person dies. Still $2,000. Now, unfortunately, that's actually not that common that a pension would have that. Many pensions are not adjusted for inflation. They'll just be the same dollar amount for a long time. If I make that pension not adjusted for inflation, my spending capacity just went down. Why is that? Well, it's actually not that hard to see here. It's because now in real terms, it's going down over time. And so more and more of the planned expenses have to be covered by the portfolio, which means you got to spend less, right? So that's just a clear case where I go to this, all right, I was able to spend almost $5,500 a month, but if that's a nominal pension, it's more like $4,800, right? So $700 less per month in order to handle future inflation. What if, go back to it being inflation adjusted, but now it's just John's. So if John dies, it goes to 0. All right, now our $5,500 goes to $5,100. Why? Because we have to account for the idea that if John dies, Mary's not going to have that resource. So we got to hold some money back in order to be able to replace it. Now, we don't know when John's going to die. It's very common to, this is another place where people are used to stating a date of death for somebody in a plan. The problem with doing that is if you go really long, you say John's going to live to 100. Well, that'll be conservative from a portfolio standpoint, but it'll be very aggressive in terms of what you're assuming this pension is going to provide. Probably John's not going to live to 100. But if you're planning, if you're saying, no, this household's going to have $2,000 a month from a pension until John's 100, you're going to overstate what they can spend. You'll notice if we shift it to Mary, who's a little younger, and she's female, so we're using female mortality tables, you still got to knock it down from 5,500, but it's to 5,300 instead of 5,100, right? Because she's probably going to live a little longer. So the nice thing about the way Income Lab treats mortality risk is we're really weighing those risks and saying, hey, there's always a chance in any given month that one of these folks is going to pass away, and then the other person's going to have to live on the remaining assets. How much less should we spend because of that? And then finally, if I shift to John's, single life, and it's not adjusted for inflation, now I'm at 4,500 per month instead of 5,500, right? So I got to spend $1,000 less to make up for the mortality risk. If John passes away, this money's gone, and the inflation risk. If inflation's high, they're going to have to make up for it with money from their investment account. So those are why you need to make sure that you've got those inflation treatments and the survivorship amounts, right? Social Security, which most people have, is exactly like this. Now it happens to be adjusted for inflation, but the combined Social Security of John and Mary is, in a sense, it's not joint life. If somebody dies, one of those Social Securities is going to go away. It's the smaller of the two typically, and the effect of that will depend on what the actual numbers are, but that's also included in this. So Income Lab does a great job of kind of helping balance those those risks, the longevity risk and mortality risk is a way to think about it. What if I live too long? What if I don't live long enough? Right, those two things. Okay, so now Jason was getting to this next step, which is now that we have a resources plan, right? We got everything we can use to fund our lifestyle. We're adding in the crucial expenses. This is the first time you've seen expenses in this process. We haven't even talked about them yet. So what kinds of things do you want to add to this resources plan to make it kind of the core plan, the thing you're going to base all your other planning from? And next week we're going to talk about those steps. The steps, just to remind everybody, are tax smart planning, scenario planning, and so on. So back to you, Jason, on this. What kinds of key and other variable expenses do you typically see? And which ones, which ones you typically include and which ones we kind of leave for a scenario planning or a nice to have kind of situation?
We like to, in general, if it's a prospect, it's early on, we're evaluating resources, spending capacity, and we're not getting any of those variable expenses for the most part. Now, if we're dealing with a client, that's where we will be very granular. So if it's a goal they have, it's a bucket list item that's going to be a bigger ticket expense, we will build that into the plan. And that's ultimately, those family vacations. That's going to be the mortgage payoff, the wedding, an anniversary gift, those types of items. And then, we've got a core driving factor as well, and that is if a legacy is of desire. And legacy can mean a lot of things. In this instance, portfolio balance at end of plan. That's the way it's oftentimes kind of viewed as a legacy. And so do they have a specified dollar amount that they would like to leave behind? And oftentimes the answer is you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. And inevitably, there typically is money left over because when we think about this guardrail system and spending capacity, not all clients are comfortable spending up to their capacity. And so that opens up the opportunity for them to think through gifting while they're alive and gifting their legacy in viewing their children, their grandchildren, reaping the fruits of their labor and benefiting from those dollars where they've gifted with a warm hand and a beating heart.
I really like that example. So you can think of all of these expenses, whether it's the gifting that you just said, or the final legacy, let my executor do it, as things that will change what I can spend on everything else. Right. So if you said, okay, we're going to do these family vacations, we're going to do we're going to help our kids with a down payment. These are all going to mean, okay, that's fine. Here's how that would change what you could spend on everything else. So for example, I've got that same plan, $5,500 a month. If I say, no, actually, I want to leave $500,000 adjusted for inflation, that's just another spending goal essentially that you need to fund. And so by funding it, you're going to have to spend less on everything else. And, you may actually be surprised at how little it is. In this case, goes from 5,500 to 5,000. But you would see the same effect adding any of those other things. And I like what you said, which is really typical ones might be paying off a mortgage or things like that, but it's about the client and what do they see as sort of the non-negotiable, most important, the things they want to see listed in their plan and so on. It's not that there is some list that everybody's going to include and, things you'll never include. If it's important enough, it'll be included.
And I think, as you build in those variable items, it shows how in tune you are with your client. It shows you're listening. It shows that you're planning around their goals, their dreams, their aspirations. And so there is a client experience to that approach, and a good one at that.
That makes sense. This is also a place we may go over a few more of these examples, especially next weekend in the 6th session where we're going to do some case studies. This is where you would be doing some you always have this core plan, which contains the absolute necessary, all the resources and these key variable expenses. But this is also the place where you can start copying a plan and adding things. Maybe, hey, what would this look like if we wanted to make sure we could fund long-term care and, for 4 years at the end of the plan? Or what would this look like if we bought the lake house? Things like that. The key thing there is you're changing what the expenses are in a plan. You might be changing the timing of plans, and the key here, which is what I did to create that list, is we're always going back to the core plan, copying it, and then making the changes. And so then you end up with this, now you're not typically going to be changing whether a pension is joint or not, but you can see the example of, okay, we've got all these different options. How is spending capacity changing depending on, which expenses I'm putting in and timing and so on.
One thing, if I could, Justin, just to add there, as you think about your working years, you maybe have a paycheck from your wages and then you get a bonus. So the way we talk to our clients about it is, would you rather us send your full spending capacity every month, whether that's 5,000 in this case or 5,500, and then you're responsible to budget for your vacations and those items, maybe a wedding and such, or would you rather us send you a monthly allocation of that 5,000 per month? That's your needs. And then these one-off wants and wishes that you're going to pursue, call in and request an ad hoc distribution, or better yet, if we know the date of when you're going to take that vacation or when you're going to pay off that mortgage or when the wedding's going to occur, we'll reach out to you proactively and determine the appropriate amount and when to send those dollars. So we think of it as salary and bonus. Would you rather have those lumped together in just a monthly income, or would you rather have a salary every month and be able to call in on that bonus when you desire?
I like that a lot. And that's actually a nice thing you can do, because you're talking about spending capacity, what you're eligible for. And then you're saying, let's live within our means. Well, it's not about spending the same amount every month. It might be about, buying the new car or things like that. And so if you're spending within your means, nothing wrong with that. What's really going to happen is you'll just get a lot more good news because you're spending a bit less. Diving a bit more into that, the types of expenses that you would add to create a core plan. This is another place where things differ between Income Lab and other approaches. What we've been talking about is these, what we call other or variable expenses. It's the irregular, temporary, special, big, important stuff. We're not so far talking about baseline expenses, putting the gas in the car, going to get groceries, stuff like that. So what is the difference between these? The key difference is, at least if you're running a standard income lab plan, which is asking, what can I spend? Other variable expenses change your spending capacity. That's because they're saying, okay, well, you're gonna buy the lake house, you're gonna gift, you're gonna take that vacation. Okay, how does that change your other spending? Baseline expenses, on the other hand, they're optional, but it's really just about how are you going to spend the other stuff? Am I going to have details on the groceries and the gas, or am I just going to have a big number? The confusing thing here is, so other variable expenses are always actually spent in the plan. These are goals, or high priority goals, or things we're going to do. And so your spending capacity is going to change because of them. If you're running a how much can I spend plan, baseline, you don't have to put them in there. I don't mean that they're optional expenses. I mean that it's optional to use them in the plan. But they're really just there to compare to your spending capacity. So in that example, if we said, oh, it's $5,500 a month, if you now want to ask the question, well, is that enough? Well, you might want to do some baseline planning. Hey, what are we spending today? We'll talk about this in session 4 and 5. If you are using a different kind of planning with Income Lab where you are targeting a net of tax spending level, then we'll use the baseline expenses as that target. So if you're doing it, how much can I spend plan? Your income, your spending capacity could be more than your baseline expenses. And all that's saying is you can afford more than you're spending. And then, what Jason was just talking about, we'd start having some conversations about it. Or there might be a shortfall where you say, oh, it looks like you're thinking you're going to be able to spend more than you can afford. Let's have a conversation about that. That can be confusing if you're used to starting with the budget. Since you didn't start with the budget here, you actually got an answer to what can I spend without even building a budget. So the baseline expenses are really the place where you can start to look at whether that spending capacity is reasonable. And so when we're going from core plan, which just has this stuff, to from resources plan to a core plan, the main thing we're generally adding are expenses. All the things we were just talking about are other variable expenses. You can do baseline planning or not. It's up to you. You can list it as a big number, or you can itemize them. But either way, they're going to behave really as just a point of comparison. Here's an example. So here I had a plan with a $9,000 a month spending capacity. Again, I'm using really, really simple stuff here. And then I added a mortgage payment of $2,000 a month. What happened? Well, what I can spend right now went up, but that's because I'm paying off my mortgage too. Actually, everything else went down, right? So it went from 9,000 to 8,500. It didn't go to 7,000, which would be 9,000 minus my mortgage, because the mortgage ends, right? So it's just, hey, how can I fill up the swimming pool, given that I'm also going to pay off my mortgage? That's what will happen with other variable expenses. With baseline expenses, I could put it at $9,000 a month, bottom line, or I could put in all sorts of food, entertainment, travel, other, Medicare premiums and so on. Either way, it's just a big block that goes up to $9,000, right? So that's the difference between other variable expenses and baseline expenses. Variable expenses are going to change things. Baseline expenses just make the picture more interesting. That's really the main difference. All right. So I know there's one other thing we haven't talked about that was in that resources plan piece, Jason, which is there are some assumptions that also go into answering the question, what can I spend? And those are the length of the plan and the assumptions around the shape of your spending. Will you spend the same every month, or will that change over time? What are best practices there? What do you do typically on both plan length and what we call income path.
Yes. So Justin, I do think you're still sharing your screen. I don't know if that's by design or not, but to your point, the retirement smile, right? We think about the retirement smile. We've heard a lot of different ways. You've got the go-go years, slow-go years, the no-go years. The retirement smile is just like you think. And arguably, you retire and you've made all these sacrifices in your life. You've got these bucket list items that you didn't pursue in your working years, and you're looking to take that trip to Europe, or buy that vacation home. And that is typically where we see clients spending more money early in retirement. And that's an interesting concept because most folks have read online that they're going to need 80% of their spending. And so it is an interesting conversation. And so we actually just anecdotally use evidence and talk about the clients we've worked with. The clients we work with typically need 100 to 120% income replacement in the first 5, 10, 15 years in retirement. And the reason it's for that period of time is based on the difference between kind of their lifespan and their health span. So a person might live to be 90, but are you going to travel to Europe when you're 90? I have a client who's 87 traveling to Europe, actually going to Italy here in 2 weeks. So yes, it's possible, but it's not the norm, right? The norm is after we get a little bit older, maybe we're not as mobile and we're just not as interested in traveling abroad. That's where we would be more in that low where we would spend less. So just to recap, right? We're spending more early in retirement. We get more comfortable. We've pursued some of those goals. We've checked off those bucket list items. Maybe we're more interested in being a homebody or staying local. That's where we have a lull. And then at the end, prepared for a potential health event. And those can be costly as well. So, some clients though, what I will say is, we have to use some different quotes to help them kind of understand this spending more money early in retirement versus later in retirement. And so I share a quote. It's a Dalai Lama quote. And so the Dalai Lama, when he was asked what surprised him most about humanity, he said, man, because he sacrifices his health in order to make more money. Then he sacrifices money to recuperate his health. And then he is so anxious about the future that he does not enjoy the present. The result being that he does not live in the present or the future. He lives as if he were never going to die and dies never having lived. So it's powerful stuff. It's deep. It will certainly make you think. And this is exactly speaking to the retirement smile. This is the idea that tomorrow isn't guaranteed and we don't know exactly what the future holds. And so through the guardrail system, having confidence to know, okay, money's going to last me a lifetime. What am I eligible to spend? I've been constrained my entire life with my wages and what I earn from my employer. I no longer have those confines. I no longer have those restraints. Now I really am in control. That's where the smile comes.
That's a great place to wrap up. It's actually going back to what we were talking about last week, 2 weeks ago, which was about, making the most of the resources. Just so that everybody can see, I just added that retirement smile, same exact resources, but now we're spending, over 6,100 instead of under 5,500, right? So as Jason was saying, if you have a situation where you're really trying to squeeze a little more juice out of that lemon early in retirement, that's a really nice way to just do that. Same resources, you're just front loading the spending when it's needed most and not planning to spend as much when you probably won't be. We'll include a video of a story for how to talk about this with clients in some of the materials that we're going to distribute. It's a really nice way to talk about kind of the regret zone and avoiding the regret zone using this kind of planning. I know, Jason, sometimes you will even start a plan, without this, just not to confuse people, and then introduce the concept of the smile if needed, which I thought was a really nice nice way to go. So I want to wrap up with some questions, and just so everybody knows, next week we're going to continue this conversation. We'll talk about scenario planning. We'll talk about talking about the process with clients and setting expectations, which I know, Jason, you have some really good thoughts on. So stay tuned. This is very much a to be continued, but we have lots of questions. Definitely not time to hit all of them. But let's see what we have that's most. I don't know if Taylor and Ashley, if you've had a chance to look at some.
There's a lot going on in the Q&A today. So for those who submitted questions, note that we will get you answers that are direct to your questions. So I can't pinpoint one, Justin. If you
There's nothing with high number. I'll just start knocking them off. So can you do all this building resources and core plans in LifeHub? Absolutely. In fact, it's a really nice way to do it because everything's at the touch of a fingertip. So you don't need to click nowhere in a stepper to find stuff. You just click on the thing you want to change and do it. Somebody was asking, where do the inflation assumptions come from? I mean, to some extent, they come from you. So you can set your own inflation assumptions. Cool thing about Income Lab is it actually includes inflation risk as part of the plan. So what do I mean by that? I mean that you're not just setting an inflation assumption in terms of average, you're also putting in standard deviation. So can inflation differ? Could it be higher or lower than expected? Absolutely. We all know that. And actually, there's an article in KITSIS that I wrote exactly about that. So we'll link to that in the materials as well.
There is one, Jason, can you remind everyone where you got who that quote was from, just since we have you on here live?
Dalai Lama.
We can throw that one in the we have a little microsite that we're building for everybody, so we'll keep throwing some of these things in there. When you're building an investment portfolio for a prospect, what do you do there, Jason? Since you're probably not going to know everything about it.
Yeah, so I just use the asset allocation, right? So you choose the model, whether you're 60% equity, 75. So from a prospecting standpoint, and then I also typically use the flat spending for a prospect as well, just because it's path of least resistance, and it's less to explain when it comes to the retirement smile. It's building in some theoretical insurance, metaphorical insurance, and they're going to have a little bit more left in their plan and into plan, but prospects, that's the approach I've used.
Here's one, Justin. Is there a way to illustrate the assumed allocation to the client? So talking to them about it, when you talked earlier about the assumed allocation and illustrating that.
Yeah, there's a couple spots. You can certainly see it just by clicking on this piece. So here's, high level stocks, bonds, other rates of return, and then breaking it down by the level and so on. You can also show how different levels of investment of allocation would, so maybe I say more bonds. And let's change the allocation here to, be super conservative. And just like with inflation or with joint or not joint pensions, or with adding a legacy goal or an expense, now you'll see a change in the spending capacity. In this case, not a huge amount, which is awesome. A couple $100.
I think
right.
we're good there to wrap up on time, Justin, for the survey that comes out afterwards to make sure everyone has their CFP ID entered. Unless you had something pressing, Justin.
No, I mean, there's a lot of great questions here. So I think what we may do is we'll try to include as many of these as we can in our continuation in 2 weeks, so that people don't feel that this is kind of left unanswered. But really appreciate everybody coming on today. Jason, as always, love your real world experience and contributions here. make sure to get that Dalai Lama quote from you. And hope to see everybody in 2 weeks.
See you in a few weeks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.